Well, God created the Miccosukee Indian people from the earth. And that's why they say this earth is Mother Earth. That's why it is so important to them to hold on to it. God created Indian people from the earth, and they come out of earth.
Outlook, another in a weekly series of in-depth reports on issues and news events of interest to the South Florida community. Tonight, The Reluctant American, the story of a small band of Florida Indians and their fight to regain the land of their ancestors and their identity as a separate nation. Your reporter, Tom Miller.
Good evening. Historians tell us that the Indian wars in Florida ended about the time of the Civil War, and that all the tribes of Florida have been officially at peace with the white man since the early 1870s. This is not altogether true. Deep in the Everglades, due west of Miami, live a band of Miccosukee Indians who have never been conquered by the white man or submitted to his law by treaty. Fiercely disdainful of both the white man and fellow tribesmen who have accepted life on federal and state reservations, the proud Miccosukees demand the return of vast areas of Florida Everglades and recognition as a sovereign nation apart from the United States. They've already taken their case to the president and threatened to appeal to the United Nations and the World Court. In a moment, a close-up of the Reluctant Americans. Scattered throughout the primitive Everglades of Florida are tiny bands of vanishing people, the Miccosukee Seminoles. While virtually all of America's red men have long adjusted to reservation life or been absorbed by the white man's society, the Miccosukees, or at least a portion of them, continue to resist the world around them. This group, the Osceola clan, has for more than a decade been pressing for what most authorities and Indians themselves consider an impossible demand. The Miccosukees want the United States government to give them 143,000 acres of Florida territory so that they might live as their ancestors did, a sovereign nation separate and apart from civilization. The only white man the Miccosukee seem to trust is their attorney and chief strategist, Morton Silver.
After a series of violations of the Miccosukee's treaties, the Miccosukee General Council got together and held a series of meetings and drew up a buckskin declaration of protest to President Eisenhower, which they delivered in 1954, requesting an end to the treaty violations and encroachments, and asking that President Eisenhower appoint a personal representative to meet with the Miccosukee Council and negotiate a settlement of the disputes. President Eisenhower did this in 1954, and he appointed the Honorable Glenn Emmons as his special and personal representative to meet with the Miccosukees. After that, there were a series of negotiations that took place over a period of about 5 to 6 years, in which Mr. Emmons was able to persuade the Miccosukees to lower their demands for confirmation of their land ownership in Florida from 5 million acres down to 140,000 acres of swampland out here in the middle of the state, which is underwater practically all year round. After the Indians finally agreed that they would keep this as their land and not ask for any more land, the government promised to send them an agreement in writing, a trust agreement. And the Indians have been patiently waiting for the last 3 years for this trust agreement and have never received it.
But the Miccosukees are far from united in their goals. In 1962, after years of fruitless talks with the government, a Miccosukee faction, the Tigers, broke away from the main body of the tribe. The Tigers agreed to drop their land claims in exchange for financial assistance from the United States. Embittered by the rift, another group, the Billies, pulled up stakes and moved deeper into the Everglades, rejecting all further contact with the white man. Only the middle-of-the-road Osceolas remain, still selling souvenirs to the tourists along Tamiami Trail, but refusing to capitulate to the government and join the Tigers on the reservation. The Osceolas accused the government of treachery and the breakaway Tigers of bartering their birthright. Expert opinion differs concerning the origin and identity of the Miccosukee Indians, a pertinent point in their dispute with the United States. Some historians and anthropologists uphold the Miccosukee's claim that they were the original inhabitants of Florida and that the Seminoles, a renegade band of Creek Indians from the north, followed them. The fact that the Miccosukees speak a tongue different from the Seminoles tends to substantiate this theory. Some authorities, however, argue that the Seminoles are actually a collection of Indians of various origins, including the Miccosukees and a liberal sprinkling of runaway Negro slaves. Early Spanish and English settlers of Florida had a great respect for the fiercely proud Indians they found here. The Spanish knew them as the Talapuches, while the British called them the Lower Creeks to distinguish them from the larger Creek Confederacy inhabiting Georgia and the Carolinas. The present-day tribe, known as the Miccosukees, claimed to be descendants of these original Indians. Both the Spanish and the British respected them as able warriors, trusted allies, and an independent people. They never conquered the Indians militarily, negotiating treaties for the land they occupied. When the United States obtained Florida from Spain by treaty in 1821, expeditions were launched to suppress the Indians and regain runaway slaves that had joined them in the Everglades. Thus began the first of two Seminole Wars, sparked in 1818 by invasion of Indian country by U.S. troops under the command of General Andrew Jackson. The first Seminole War was actually a series of indecisive skirmishes, and a treaty was signed in 1823. The treaty guaranteed the Indians a 4-million-acre strip of land down the center of the state, including most of Florida's present citrus, cattle, and phosphate country. However, a few years later, the United States government decided that all Indians should be moved west of the Mississippi. It attempted to resettle the Florida Indians in Oklahoma. Fighting resumed, and the Second Seminole War was launched. In 1832, Chief Osceola, leader of the Indian resistance and himself a Miccosukee, was offered a treaty requiring agreement to the deportation of his people to Oklahoma. Osceola responded by slashing the paper with his dagger and stalking off. Later, under a false flag of truce, Osceola was captured and died in prison. The Second Seminole War dragged on well into the 1840s and resulted in some Indians being relocated in Oklahoma. In 1839, the Miccosukees and the Seminoles signed another treaty granting to the United States all but the southern tip of Florida along a line from Fort Myers to West Palm Beach. Later, the Indians were offered a second treaty that would further confine their holdings, but the pact was never ratified. Although still clinging to the 1839 treaty, the Miccosukee have narrowed their claim to a 143-acre island of swamp deep in Everglades National Park. Dr. Carlton Tebold, chairman of the University of Miami History Department, looks back on the record of agreements made and broken.
Three of these treaty makings, and particularly in the Treaty of Payne's Landing and the one made out in Oklahoma at Fort Gibson, the Indians charged that they had been misled, they had been coerced, they had been made drunk on occasion, but the United States chose to ignore these protests and treat these agreements as legal and binding, and they became the basis for Indian removal. Then if we skip forward to about the year 1924, the United States government at that time decided that Seminole Indians and other Indians in the United States should become citizens of the United States with all the privileges and responsibilities associated with that status. But actually, the Indians have neither discharged their responsibilities nor enjoyed all the privileges of citizenship. This, of course, is somewhat reminiscent of the way other minority groups are treated in the United States.
Attorney Morton Silver, speaking for the unreconstructed Miccosukees, comments on the government's handling of modern-day negotiations.
In the meantime, the government, through its Indian Bureau, was up to their old tactics of divide and conquer, and attempted or did persuade a few individuals to leave the Miccosukee tribe And these individuals have been, in cooperation with the federal government, impersonating the present Miccosukee, the legitimate Miccosukee. What they've been doing with the government we have no knowledge of really, except we do know that they are impersonating the Miccosukee tribe and they are no longer members of it.
For the better part of the last 100 years, the Miccosukees have lived in peaceful isolation from the white man, deep in his impenetrable homeland, the Everglades. But the incessant press of civilization seems finally about to destroy the peace of these proud people. State and federal conservation projects are flooding portions of their hunting ground, reclaiming others for future development. Oil companies, in search of hidden sources of petroleum, have damaged Indian fishing preserves with dynamite blasts. Recently, the Seminoles agreed to sell 461 acres of reservation land to the state for the proposed Fort Lauderdale-Naples tollway. The Miccosukee Tigers, whom federal authorities recognize as the official tribe after their alleged sellout in 1962, objected to the sale. Later, they were persuaded to drop their opposition. But the Osceola Miccosukees claim they represent the official tribe and still oppose the deal. The question of recognition is one of many issues that divide the Miccosukes. Until recently, state and federal authorities refused to consider them a separate tribe. But their isolation only united the Tigers, the Osceolas, and the Billies. With discussions in progress, the United States recognized the Miccosukes as a tribe distinct and apart from the Seminoles. But no progress was made toward a land settlement, and 4 years later, the government persuaded the Tigers to accept reservation status instead, granting the Tigers a charter as the official Miccosukee tribe. Since then, government talks with the Osceolas and Billies have all but ended. Both factions insist that the Tigers do not represent the tribe and that the government had no right to recognize them as such. Reginald Miller is their Indian agent and their guide in the white man's world.
Since the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida have been organized, they have done many things to further their advance. They have started a school down here with the help of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, with Dade County's Board of Education. We have 31 students in school. They all accept it. They're very happy. The tribe, under the leadership of Buffalo Tiger, has started a tribal enterprise. They are in a building restaurant right now, a service station. They have other plans for development. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is assisting them. They have employed various people to help them, not only in the Bureau, which is, of course, by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but they've hired outside help, such as a Dr. Wolf, who has a feasibility report prepared for them. They have employed legal counsel to assist them in their contracts, which just recently, and they're looking forward. We think that they're going to progress more than probably any tribe in the last good many years. And we think they're very happy, and we're going to do all we can to help them.
We'll return to the reluctant Americans after this message. Leonard Kimbrel, a Miami attorney, is chief counsel for the Tigers.
The Osceola's claims for land, as I understand their claim, is a dream. They've waited too long to attempt to reacquire land that has been deeded out to others over a period of 100 years or more. The only answer to their claim, if any, is an attempt to recover the value of the land in money. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has arranged to acquire an area of land beginning at about the 40-mile ranger station in the Everglades National Park to afford this land to the Miccosukee Indian tribe, that is the official tribe members, for home sites, for a building for arts and crafts where the Indians may sell their products, a community building where these Indians and others may gather for purposes of enjoyment. And this area extends about 5.5 miles long and 500 feet deep. The plans for the homes have already been drawn. They've been approved by the government and will be built out or from the use of about a $300,000 grant to the Miccosukee tribe by the federal government.
But the legality of their position means little to the Osceolas, as little as the white man's offers of money and a reservation. Howard Osceola, a leader of his people, holds only disdain for the Tigers.
Well, you take it this way. One of your army officers or any government official will run away, go to Cuba or Russia. You don't consider him as one of you anymore because you have a name for it, traitor or whatever you want to call it. So we have the same feelings. We figure it this way. Every nation has what you call a Benedict, Arnold, and turncoats. So we considered the Tiger Bunch as turncoats. And we're a little bit ashamed about it, but you do have weak ones in every nation. But that don't destroy the nation. The nation always survives.
Chief Buffalo Tiger defends his group's course of action.
We're always against the progress white man calls. But recent years we realized we must accept white man's way. And especially old folks are always against it. But they have go along with us. We have asked the government steps in to help give us hands. We accept education and trying to make our life better, remain be Miccosukee. I believe Miccosukee people, they are proud, they always have been. And our way to hope to see it be better in the future. And I know United States and Florida both would do everything they could to help us.
The federal government, meanwhile, ignores the demands of the Osceolas, content to deal with the more agreeable Tigers. Having split the tribe, government agents are secure in their belief that time and the law are on their side. Phineal Nash of the U.S. Department of Interior's Commission of Indian Affairs flatly denies the existence of a dispute with the Miccosukees.
We're getting along very, very well with the Seminoles and the Miccosukees at the present time, probably better than in the entire history of Florida or of the whole country. We have a very cooperative working relationship between the Indians, the federal government, and the state of Florida, which is going to result in improved economic conditions, better housing, more employment, more income, and extended benefits to the whole state of Florida through the result of this cooperative relationship. There are some people who would like to allege that this is not the case, and there's even been a national magazine story to this effect. This is not the way we see it from Washington, and this is not the way our relationships are being conducted with the Seminoles or Miccosukees of Florida.
Attorney Morton Silver disputes Nash's contentions in behalf of his untamed Miccosukee clients.
The government is getting along perhaps with those few individual Miccosukees that they persuaded to leave the Miccosukee tribe. However, they are not getting along with the Miccosukees because there have been no dealings or relationships with the Miccosukees over the past 3 or 4 years.
What is being done for the Seminoles now is an unparalleled extension of federal assistance and state assistance in the way of land, credit, technical assistance, and support for education and training.
The Indians have not been given any land. They have never asked for any land. They have only asked that a small portion of the 5 million acres that they own in Florida be confirmed to them. And as I said, they are still waiting to receive the agreed trust agreement, which was promised to them and has never been sent to the Executive Council.
It simply isn't true that we are not talking to the Seminoles or that we are not giving them land. We are.
The government has made absolutely no effort to talk with the Executive Council. The only Indians that they may be talking to are the few individuals that are working with the government on their payroll and no longer represent the Miccosukee tribe. As a matter of fact, the government has been avoiding talking to the Miccosukee Council.
a strip of land along the Tamiami Trail and the very valuable crossovers along the newly built canal are being provided by the state of Florida, and we have also done some of this through the federal government.
The attitude of federal and state authorities has prompted the Miccosukee to make rash and dramatic threats. In 1959, when Fidel Castro came to power, a delegation of tribesmen went to Havana and offered to grant Cuba its land claims in exchange for protection. Castro jubilantly recognized the sovereign Miccosukee nations. The Miccosukees have also threatened to join Russia and Red China, take their case to the World Court, call on their former allies, Britain, France, and Spain, for military assistance, and form a united Indian republic with other dissatisfied tribes. There is a thin thread of legality which the Osceolas cling to in their struggle with the federal government. It is a decision of the United States Supreme Court handed down in 1835. The case, Mitchell versus the United States, affirmed the Indians' right of ownership of virtually all of Florida. The Miccosukees claimed the U.S. government systematically ignored its own treaty obligations and the rights of the Indians as stated in the Mitchell decision. But the case, more than a century old, does not specifically mention the Miccosukees, but refers to the Seminoles. Recently, the Indian Claims Commission sided with the Seminoles in judging that the government pay the Indians for 32 million acres of land. The figure, if paid, would be an astronomical $80 million. The federal government, however, is seeking a rehearing to get out from paying the money and has until the 31st of this month to file its briefs. The Seminoles' chief counsel in the case, Roy Strubble, compares his stand with that of the Miccosukees.
Seminoles, the Miccosukee and the Muskogees would rather have their land because they're close to the land. It's a spiritual thing. But the act of Congress that authorizes this action does not contemplate any restoration of land. It merely provides for payment in money. And there is just no provision in law for restoring these lands. I'm satisfied that we can't go over and take the Americana Hotel away from the present claimants, and that's true with most of even the unoccupied land in Florida.
Yet, in the snarl of legal red tape, white man's law, and the power of the federal government, the proud, determined character of the Indian remains, overwhelmed but not overpowered. Howard Osceola expresses a logic and a philosophy that existed in Florida long before the white man.
And that's why they say this earth is Mother Earth. That's why it is so important to them to hold on to it. God created Indian people from the earth, and they come out of earth.
We'll return with the outlook for the reluctant Americans in a moment. The Miccosukee today finds the trail to Washington as dark and foreboding as his ancestors found the white man's treaties of frontier days. Over the years, the government has developed programs for the health, education, and welfare of the Indian, but still the red man haunts our conscience. Perhaps it is because there can be no turning back of the clock, for it is neither likely nor practical for the Miccosukee to recover lands that have, through evolution, become part of every American's heritage. The Miccosukee, like most of Florida's 1,100 Indians, eventually will have to accept the white man's reward and live and prosper in the white man's world. Sad but unmistakable is his losing struggle to preserve the culture of his birthright in a land that prides itself in freedom in the American tradition. The Miccosukee will have his day in court. He'll do battle with the soldiers of the law. But in the unlikely spirit of the traditional Western, he can't help but win for losing. This is Tom Miller for Outlook. Good night.
You have been watching The Reluctant American on Outlook, a weekly presentation of WCKT News. Next Saturday at 6:30, Outlook will present another report of interest to the South Florida community. This program was pre-recorded. WCKT invites your comments upon this program and your views as to how we can otherwise serve you through television.